let's turn to a disturbing case that raises urgent questions about law, power, and the protection of human dignity in Nigeria. Dr. Pedro Obaseki has announced his decision to seek justice following what he describes as a brutal public abduction and assault in Benin City in late December. According to a detailed statement released through his legal team, Dr. Obaseki was forcibly taken in public, violently assaulted, stripped, threatened with death, and unlawfully detained for several hours, an ordeal that was recorded and circulated. He maintains that these acts amount to grave criminal violations under Nigerian law and says his decision to pursue legal redress is driven not by vendetta or politics, but by the need for accountability, deterrence, and the protection of other citizens. While claims were made during the incident that the attackers acted on behalf of the Oba of Benin, those claims have been formally and categorically denied by the Benin Traditional Council. A clarification Dr. Obaseki says he accepts and places on record. Legal proceedings are now being initiated against the alleged perpetrators and any individuals found through due process to have enabled the acts. Well, leading this effort is one of Nigeria's foremost human rights lawyers, Mr. Femi Falana, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. And Mr. Falana joins me now on the line from Lagos. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Falana, for joining us. I know you've had an incredibly busy day, and I am eternally grateful to you for joining us. Now, based on the facts as you understand them, what specific offences under Nigerian law are you alleging were committed against Dr. Pedro Obaseki?
Well, the events of 28th of December 2025 in Benin City are clearly criminal. His right to life was threatened by the criminal gang that descended on him while he was playing football in the heart of Benin City. He was abducted, stripped naked, and beaten to a pulp by the well-armed gang. As a matter of fact, in order to disperse the crowd that gathered on the football field, these criminals shot into the air. So again, they were armed. We're going to find out whether they have licenses to bear arms. But clearly, there was an attempt on the life of Dr. Pedro Obaseki. As if those terrorist acts were not enough, he was stripped naked and paraded. Again, his right to dignity was violated. His right to personal liberty was breached in the sense that for several hours he was captured, paraded, and led to the palace of the Oba of Benin, who ordered that Dr. Obaseki be taken to the police station. You will have expected that the assailants would be arrested, made to make a statement by the police, and confronted with the allegations of criminality they had perpetrated during the day. To Dr. Obaseki's utter chagrin, was detained in the police station for about 5 hours and only allowed to go home after making a statement, after being forced to make a statement. In other words, he became the suspect while the criminals who had wanted to kill him were making guests of him in the police station. Up till now, none of the criminal elements have been arrested and brought to book as expected under the laws of this country. So, it's not just about Dr. Obaseki. The whole idea is to use this particular case to make a point that we operate in a civilized society whereby the rights of citizens guaranteed by the Constitution will have to be respected. The guys who subjected him to such horrendous brutalization will have to face the full weight of the law will have to descend on them. Right. And that is the only way to make a point, that this country does not encourage brigandage.
Absolutely, indeed. And this case, as you have clearly set out there, Mr. Falana, this case involves disturbing allegations. And clearly, from what you've said, obviously, the court will have to make its determination. But it sounds like the evidentiary threshold appears to have been met for criminal liability to attach to the case. Now, Dr. Obaseki's statement describes the incident as terrorism-related violence. On what legal basis does this incident meet that definition, and why is that classification significant?
Well, under the Terrorism Act of 2022, once you kidnap or abduct citizens and subject them to brutalization of their person, and in the process, expose them to ridicule, threaten their lives, or kill them. These are terrorist acts. But also, under the Anti-Torture Act of 2017, any person who subjects a Nigerian to physical, psychological, and mental torture is liable to be prosecuted. And the penalty is 25 years imprisonment, no option of fine. If the victim dies in the process, the torturer will be charged with murder. And that is without prejudice to the right of the victim or the members of the family of the victim to sue for compensation. We are going to put these laws to test.
Indeed,
so that the point can be made. The point can be made that nobody is above the law in this country. So whoever has sent these guys will have to be vicariously liable in a civil court for their actions.
So there is the issue of physical harm. There is, you talked about public stripping, parading, even live streaming, all things related to human dignity, constitutional rights, and so on. But the attackers allegedly claimed they were acting on the authority of the Oba of Benin, claims that have since been formally denied. But legally, how serious is impersonation or abuse of claimed authority in cases like this?
where our law does not allow any person to engage in criminal acts on behalf of another person. So there is no vicarious liability in crimes in this country. In this instance, the Oba of Benin has dissociated himself, or the Benin Traditional Council has dissociated the Oba of Benin from the terrorist acts. So these guys are now on their own, and they are going to pay dearly for their criminal acts.
And are these proceedings...
Apart from
right,
the criminal aspect, you also have the civil aspect of the whole violations of the right of Dr. Pedro Obaseki.
And are these proceedings limited to the individuals who carried out the attacks, or could liability extend to anyone who facilitated, enabled, or failed to intervene? And that, obviously, failure to intervene involves the police.
For sure, the fact that the Edo State Police Command, has not arrested and charged these guys under the law, somebody will have to give some explanation. The detention of Dr. Obaseki for 5 hours in a police station in Benin City will have to be explained to the authorities. And of course, the endorsement of the brutalization of his person will have to be explained by the police. And I do hope we're going to initiate criminal proceedings. We're going to ask the authorities to also invoke appropriate disciplinary measures so that police officers will not look the other way. Why unarmed citizens of this country, law-abiding citizens of this country, are subjected to such brutalization without any justification whatsoever. And of course, for the criminal elements involved, it is their business to disclose to the law enforcement agencies upon the commencement of criminal proceedings who sent them, on whose authority they were acting, and if they want to bear the penalty alone, so be it.
And let me ask you this then, and you are obviously a very experienced lawyer. You're a constitutional lawyer, you're a human rights lawyer, you're a criminal lawyer. So you know all these cases, you know all these things, but a lot of Nigerians may not necessarily be as au fait, let me put it that way, with the law as you are. So if I ask you questions that seem a little bit sort of, pedantic, please don't take the time to answer it for us. What obligations does the state, particularly the police and the security agencies, have when such a public and violent incident occurs in broad daylight?
Charles, our law has left these guys behind, and that is the lesson that will be learned in this case. One, there are not less than 10 decisions of our courts that, to the effect that even criminal suspects cannot be paraded because they are presumed innocent until the contrary is proved by the state. In this case, it is worse because nobody has alleged that Dr. Pedro Obaseki committed any offense known to law. Secondly, our courts have also condemned the brutalization of citizens in this country. And that was what culminated in the enactment of the Anti-Torture Act of 2017, which itself was a domestication of the Anti-Torture Convention ratified by Nigeria. In other words, meting out torture, subjecting Nigerians to torture, has been criminalized. Again, in several decisions of our courts, illegal arrests of citizens, illegal detention of citizens, and violations of the right to dignity have been condemned by our courts. Colossal damages have been awarded to victims of human rights abuse in our country. And of course, the courts have had cause to direct the attorneys general of states and the attorney general of the federation to prosecute criminal elements who may be well connected in the society. So, in many areas, the law is settled as far as the duty on law enforcement authorities in Nigeria, as well as on citizens, to respect the human rights of fellow Nigerians.
Rights bodies. I mean, what role do they play in a case like this, and does that signal a lack of confidence in domestic remedies or simply an added layer of oversight?
Well, our courts, in the area of human rights, our courts have been up and doing. As a matter of fact, under the Fundamental Rights Enforcement Procedure Rules, 2009, even if Dr. Obaseki had not briefed our law firm as concerned citizens, as human rights defenders, we have the local standard to go to court and make the point that this primitive conduct cannot be tolerated in our country. So our law has developed in the area of human rights. In other words, like the late Justice Kayode Esho said, in the case of Fawemi and Akilu, we are all our brothers' keepers as far as human rights are concerned.
Let me ask you
But
this.
what's in the case of this? Yeah, go ahead.
Right, let me ask you this. Just beyond this case, because I mean the points you're making, and I think these are so crucial, the points that you're making, and the fact that Nigerians of all stripes and shades hopefully are listening to you this evening. Beyond this case, what message does this send to Nigerians about the rule of law, especially at a time when public violence and impunity appear to be rising in this country?
Well, the message that we're going to put across is that law-abiding citizens, unarmed citizens, cannot have their rights violated either by the state or private individuals. It's number one. Number two, we also want to make the point that impunity, the manifestation of impunity in our country, will have to stop. Of course, we also want to challenge powerful individuals in the society who may want to send lumpen elements and thugs to harass citizens. That those days are gone, when they could get away with murder. So at the end of the day, several lessons will be learned from this case. And of course, in the process, we are going to conscientize Nigerians. We are going to mobilize Nigerians to learn to defend their rights. Because I must tell you, Charles, Nigeria today has some of the best human rights legislations in the world. I have mentioned the provisions. I've referred to the Anti-Torture Act,
Right.
the Terrorism Act, the Administration of Criminal Justice Law of Edo State,
Right. Okay.
and of course, Chapter 4 of the Constitution that protects the rights of Nigerians, and indeed, all persons living in Nigeria.
Right. Well, we'll be watching this case.
Even under brutal military dictators,
Right.
we never allowed criminals and state officials to subject to Nigerians to such horrendous, humiliating,
Right.
degrading treatment.
Well, we'll be watching this case very closely, and I want to thank you very much indeed, Mr. Falana, for joining us and putting these points across as you have. Mr. Femi Falana is one of Nigeria's foremost human rights lawyers. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria, and he was talking to me on the line from Lagos. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.